Good afternoon and welcome to the Ipswich Star's latest Facebook Live video with myself, Chris Brammer, and Archant's chief football writer, Stuart Watson. We'll be discussing all things Ipswich Town for the next 10-15 minutes. It's fairly quiet at the moment at Portman Road, barring one or two predictable friendlies that have been announced this week, but there's always stuff bubbling under the surface in terms of transfer speculation, and it's Stuart's job to sort the wheat from the chaff really in terms of who might be coming to Portman Road and who may not. Let's start with one player that has been mentioned this week, Stu, and there seems to be a little bit of truth in that one. That's Joe Garner at Glasgow Rangers. What do you know about that one?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Chris, as you rightly say, it's all very quiet. We have to kind of address that at the moment, and always is at this time of year. Football kind of goes into a bit of a shutdown period in a couple of weeks. After the season finishes, the managers and players like to get their holidays in, and so I shouldn't. You know, people are always sort of saying where are the signings at this time of year, but it's normally sort of middle of June when things start to hot up. But as you rightly say, a bit of speculation already, and Joe Garner is a name that's come up. Well, he scored that hat-trick against Ipswich, didn't he, a few years ago for Preston in the FA Cup, and I'm sure that will stick in Mick's mind. He has got a bit of a history of signing players that do well against Ipswich. Cut price deal for him by all accounts. He went to Rangers for about $1.5 million last summer. Done okay in his debut season from everyone I've spoken to, 10 goals, and it sounds like they need to sell to raise some funds. $500,000 is the figure that's been mentioned. Is he worth a punt at that amount? Possibly. He's not really the target man type to replace Daryl Murphy, but he's been a bit inconsistent through his career. He's had a couple of, had a really hot spell at Preston, but probably not been a sustained success during his career, so watch this space on that one.
What do you remember about him as a player? What kind of attributes does he have?
He's certainly got that aggressive edge to him, non-stop runner. He's a bit of an all-rounder really. He's not the biggest, but he'll hold his own in the air, and went down quite easily from what I remember. There was a few sort of soft dives, shall we say, sort of seemed to wind up the fans that day, but I think he came on as a sub that day in that FA Cup replay, and the hat-trick came in about 20 minutes. We've got a video online of his sort of goals and highlights, and scored some spectacular goals. So for the price that they're talking about, might be worth a punt, but that's probably the sort of money, I think around that sort of £500,000, £1 million mark's probably what Ipswich are looking at.
Just while we're on the subject of transfers, we've just had a question from Dave Jones, who's asking, do you think Daryl Murphy will resign? Obviously being put up for sale by Newcastle last week.
Yeah, I mean, from the minute that Daryl left for Newcastle, people were talking about whether he'd end up coming back. I don't think there's any great surprise that he was signed as a bit of a short-term fix for Newcastle, a bit of championship experience to get them over the line, get them back into the Premier League, and now looks like he'll be moving on again. Should he come back here? We've asked the fans online, and I think the general consensus is, never go back. He's 33 now, and is he likely to reproduce that form of the playoff season, the 27 goals? Probably not. It's not just the goals that Ipswich have missed, obviously, it's his all-round game, I think, isn't it, Chris? The focal point to the attack, someone who could make it stick, and Ipswich have struggled to adapt without having his sort of presence. So for me personally, I think they need to look at sort of a younger model of a Daryl Murphy and not go back towards him.
Of course, just going back to Joe Garner a minute, one man that he could be lining up against next season should he stay at Rangers is Chris Brammer, who of course has re-signed for Hearts this week after leaving Ipswich after 4 years. I understand you've spoken to him this week, and there'll be an article in Saturday's EADT, quite an in-depth piece with Christoph, and I believe you got quite a bit out of him. He speaks quite warmly about his time at Town.
He does, yeah. Worst kept secret going, wasn't it, Christoph, going back to Hearts? We've known since January time really that Christoph made no secret of the fact that he wanted to get back up towards Edinburgh, his hometown, and be nearer his young daughter, and who's approaching 5, and Christoph has spoken quite openly about his family situation and how those discussions went with Mick McCarthy and Marcus Evans about him being able to leave Portman Road amicably. There could have been a potential for a bit of a standoff there, because Ipswich had the option to extend his deal for another year. I think they would quite like to have kept him for another year, but in the end they understood his personal situation, and Christoph has opened up quite a lot about that, and also look back on his 4 years at Ipswich. And I think we have to say, whatever you think about his ability on the ball and how last season went for him and the team, over the piece, he's been a remarkable free transfer signing for Ipswich, absolutely imperious in that playoff season. I don't think there was a better defender outside the top flight that year. Scored plenty of goals in his first 2 years, and just a real warrior, wasn't he? Put his head where it hurts, and
Scored some vital goals.
And has been a fantastic signing for them, so I'm sure Ipswich fans will be wishing him well.
Obviously, Berry's going to leave a hole at the back now. Ipswich are going to have to look to fill in that area, but there's another number of other players that have left, perhaps not surprisingly, in the last couple of weeks. The likes of Giles Cope, Leon Best, Jonathan Douglas is leaving, so there's scope there for Town to bring in some new players. Obviously, we understand that Town might get a windfall from Newcastle going up in the Darryl Murphy deal, but there's also a number of free agents out there that would be worth taking a punt on, perhaps, by Mick McCarthy. Who are the realistic ones that would fit into sort of his criteria and Town's price range?
Yeah, it's I can't. I know Mick and Marcus will have their chat. I don't know if it's happened or whether it is happening. Mick said it was going to happen before he went away on his holidays, so we're assuming that chat's happened. I don't get the sense that there's suddenly going to be a massive change in the transfer policy and mega money to spend this summer. They might push the boat out just a little bit more. We were talking about sort of 7-figure bids being made in back end of the summer window last year and also January. They went in for the likes of Connor Washington and Marley Watkins, Jordan Hugan, of course. But the market's moved on, hasn't it? And I think those sort of players, you're now talking Danny Ward at Rotherham, they're talking about a $5 million price tag on him, and they were talking about $4 million for Hugo. So that's kind of the way the market's gone, with the likes of Villa and Wednesday and others. Wolves potentially now as well spending a bit of money. Will Ipswich be prepared to go to those levels? I'm not convinced. So it could be the same old market of free transfers. And there's some interesting names that are available, and Mick may well delve into those. And just looking, Michael Kitely's an obvious one, with his links to Mick before at Wolves, now a free agent after his release from Burnley. Ipswich tried to get him last summer, and from what I'm told, Michael was pretty keen on being reunited with Mick here. He was on the same coaching course as Luke Chambers last summer, and they talked a lot about it, and in the end they couldn't agree a financial package with Burnley and with the player, and he ended up going to Burton on loan second half of the season. Did very well by all accounts and played quite a key role in keeping them up. Does that mean Burton now are sort of ahead of Ipswich in that sort of pecking order? I'm not sure, but he'd be one. Talking of sort of former Mick players, Cole Henry is one, and I'm sure that will go down not particularly well amongst Ipswich fans. It would seem like another, Jonathan Douglas has gone, and it would seem like another sort of veteran midfield spoiler coming in his place. But you'd never rule that out with Mick. He never seems to sort of take popular opinion into account, does he? But there's some interesting names on there. Lloyd Isgrove is sort of at the younger end of the scale. He came through the Southampton Academy, exciting winger who's been on loan at Barnsley and done well. Josh Scowen as well, and a few others. So there'll be some interesting names on there.
So merry-go-round as far as players are concerned, but also we've seen the managerial ones starting in full flow again this week. Gary Monk leaving Leeds, our neighbours up the road appointing a new manager. What do you make of it all?
Well, it's a gamble from Norwich, isn't it? Their sporting director Stuart Webber has said it's a calculated gamble. Be very interesting from an Ipswich perspective to see which way that goes. He follows in the Daniel Farke follows in the footsteps of David Wagner in coming over from Germany and Borussia Dortmund, understudies to sort of Jurgen Klopp and that system over there in Dortmund. So interesting to see what happens up the A140 there. Monk leaving Leeds is a bit of a shock, isn't it?
Yeah, we're just seeing that Lee Farrow has come on and said Monk as manager. I'm presuming that means for Ipswich. But
yeah.
Obviously, Mick's still very much here, isn't he?
Yeah, I mean everything we're hearing now seems to be that Mick's pre-season games have been announced and Mick's gone away on holiday. So I think we're pretty much looking at Mick being in charge certainly for the start of next season. But I saw that was the inevitable reaction when Monk left, that a lot of Ipswich fans were saying sort of get him in. But there's plenty of other clubs looking for managers at the moment. Of course, all three teams that have come down from the Premier League are looking for managers, and you would think that Gary Monk would probably fit the bill for one of those. So I'm not sure that he'd be the sort of manager, even if Ipswich were looking for one, which they're not at the moment. I'm not sure he'd be a realistic option.
And just looking ahead to pre-season, like we said, it's quiet at the moment, but Town have been amassing a few pre-season friendlies for later on in the summer. It's predictable fare, really. We've got Gillingham away, the latest one. I think what Town fans want to know, though, are we going to have one at Portland Road before the season starts?
Doesn't look like it. From what I'm told, the 5 games that have been announced is pretty much going to be it. 5 away games against, as you say, usual predictable fare, the standard trip to Ireland, Carton House, and then a game against an Irish side at the end of that, followed by, what have we got, Colchester, Gillingham, Charlton, Peterborough, the other one as well. So it kind of adds to that sort of Groundhog Day nature feeling of things at the moment, isn't it? Same old, same old. I understand Ipswich did try and speak to Düsseldorf, or Tuna Düsseldorf, who they've got good ties with in Germany, about revisiting that fixture, but for whatever reason, logistically, that didn't work out. In terms of a home game, obviously that is usually reserved for that weekend slot just before the season kicks off. That's where the Charlton away games penciled in. In the past, they've played Lazio and Atletico Madrid and had some decent games here, and even your West Hams and Tottenhams. But it's a shame if they're not going to have a home game, because I think that adds to the sense of build-up, and you can get good crowds for those. But doesn't look like it's going to be the case.
Are you looking forward to the start of the new season and pre-season?
Well, listen, there's no getting away from the fact at the moment that things do feel a bit stale around the club at the moment, and we've seen that with the downturn in season ticket sales, around 2,000, I'm led to believe. Same manager, similar transfer policy, we think, on the cards, same pre-season. So, I think everybody's kind of gripped by a sense of apathy at the moment, and I'd be lying if, we said that didn't sort of touch us as well a little bit here in terms of reporting on the club, day in, day out, with not a lot happening. But let's just hope that there can be a few transfers. As you rightly said earlier on, they've got a bit of room for manoeuvre now with, a bit of a clearing of the decks. They've moved a few sort of fringe players out, and I just hope that they, with the limited funds they've got, goes into a bit of quality rather than quantity this time, and can get people enthused again, including us.
Brilliant. Well, that's it from this week's Facebook Live Ipswich Town chat. Thank you very much for joining us and all your contributions, and we'll be back this time next week for more of the same. So thank you, and until then, we'll see you.